Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about leadership. But first, how is your week going, Ruth?
My week is definitely a little challenging this week, which I don't know when it's going to turn into what an easy week I've had. But it's definitely, I think the kids are fed up. You know, I think at first there was a lot of novelty in like, oh, you're our home teacher, and now they're kind of rebelling a little bit more. So
sure.
That's definitely interesting, but they're fine. I think it's just you know the pandemic, being stuck at home, all of those things.
Sure.
So I think, and I definitely am feeling a little overwhelmed about the being online stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, totally.
I think I had some idea that once we got going then it would be smooth sailing, and that is apparently not true. And yeah,
I know. Yeah. I keep having thoughts of like, well, but just as soon as I get it a little bit more set, then time will clear up and I can do all these other things. But nope. But it's all new things that we're adjusting to. You know, I didn't anticipate a lot of the things that we need to adjust to with online learning.
No, and we had, like, this wasn't a funny thing, but we definitely had, like, just things happen on Zoom.
Uh-huh.
But we even had the other day, one of the students was eating some spicy popcorn and kind of started to, like, I think it went down the wrong tube. And I was like, oh, wow, like, what would I do if somebody, like, had a medical situation on Zoom?
Right.
How would I, like, but we kind of all had a bit of a joke about it, but I was like, oh, geez, like, how responsible am I for this person's safety when they're eating popcorn in their own home?
Because we don't even know where they are. I can't call somebody.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder if we should have emergency contact information or something.
I know, we could be like, I don't know, I could see a white door, she's sitting, you know, so yeah, I don't know what that would do. Anyway,
oh, man.
Yes.
So, do you have a quote for us today?
I do, and so this is like confessing my latest obsession is with, I feel like I'm late to this
Excellent.
party and everyone else has been at this party for years, but Brene Brown, and have you heard of her?
No. So
okay,
I'm
yeah,
even later.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. I'm like, oh no, I'm the cool kid on the inside, even though I literally just got to the party. But she is super cool, and I read one of her books called I Thought It Was Just Me, but
Okay.
It isn't. And it's all about shame, and so like I'm like, shame this and shame that. And then I'm reading another one now called Daring Greatly, which is all about vulnerability.
Uh-huh.
And she's really hilarious, and she's also a professor at the University of Houston. And so last night I was reading the book and I was trying to think about where I'm going to get my quote from, and then this quote popped up. So it was, I've come to believe that a leader is anyone who holds her or himself accountable for finding potential in people and processes.
Ooh.
And so even when we had sort of suggested this episode, I was like, well, I'll defer to you, Claire, because I don't do any leadership. And then I kind of hadn't really thought of like standing in front of the classroom as being
totally
leadership, and this sort of really brought that through to me, like the idea of finding potential in people. And
I love
that's
it.
kind of our gig, isn't it? So,
that is our gig.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow,
so
that's such a good quote.
Yeah, she's super cool, and she has a TED Talk that's really cool, and some short videos. And I just found out she has a podcast, so
Ooh.
that's super exciting. I'm going to get involved with that.
So what is this latest book about?
So she has a lot of books. There's actually one that I think her latest book is called Dare to Lead.
Oh, okay.
Which I haven't, that's not the one I'm reading at the moment. I'm reading Daring Greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about vulnerability and kind of how, like, critics are often people who stand on the sidelines, but like the person, if you're trying, you're doing it.
Cool.
You know, and being vulnerable to trying new things.
That sounds awesome. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's so good. We could even do a whole episode about it. Brene Brown fangirls.
Yeah, okay.
That could be our episode.
Put it on the option list.
Okay, awesome. So can I just share something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just taking over with my own agenda. But part of, this episode, like just the whole concept of leadership, I got to see you do some pretty awesome leadership last year. And it was kind of super inspiring for me because we're both junior faculty. I don't know how long we're junior faculty for. I guess until we get tenure.
Well,
right?
we're fourth year faculty members. That's where we're at right now.
And especially, I guess maybe you're not, but I'm the youngest in my department in terms of, not age, but in terms of when we got there.
Right, yeah.
And so I was definitely really inspired by how so we have this sort of cohort called Stars to Rocks that's for physics, chemistry and geology incoming freshmen, and sort of to create community, and we have this class, and you took the lead on that. And I was super inspired by how you handled that.
Thank
and
you.
all the stuff you did. So yeah, it sort of brought to me a different concept of leadership. Like, because sometimes leadership just feels like whoever's been there the longest is in charge. Do you know what I mean? And that definitely turned that on its head. So I'm super interested to hear what you have to say about this.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll start.
That's a lot of pressure. Sorry. Sorry.
No, it's good.
Just in case you were feeling comfortable.
Well, it's good because what I was going to talk about, what's going well, is I'm kind of thinking about leadership in the context of faculty groups like this Stars to Rocks group. And also leading a research group has brought a lot of leadership ideas to me recently. So yeah, in the context of this faculty group that was doing Stars to Rocks, just for some context, it was across a few departments, chemistry, geology, and physics. We were co-teaching a class for incoming freshmen, and we were also planning a summer immersion activity for incoming freshmen. And so for one semester in a summer, I had the leadership hat for that group. And so, yeah, it was a lot of, organizing faculty and sending emails and stuff like that. So, I guess I have like a couple different thoughts, but they're all under the umbrella of, I think it seems like it goes well to me when I make decisions, trying to keep the mindset of how can I facilitate getting this person or these people to do whatever it is they need to do. How can I facilitate that? And so...
Dude, that's like right in there with, kind of being accountable for finding the potential in people, huh? Sorry, I'm just like back to
it's
but like it's really cool.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know, some of the things that, I tried and whenever I sent an email that was too long, it seemed like no one would reply. And so I took from that, okay, that wasn't the right email. So short emails, and also trying to be really clear about what response I'm looking for. So am I inviting ideas and discussion, or am I conveying information, or am I asking for action, and just trying to be really clear about that? I think in this experience that I had with this leadership position, if I was extra clear about that, it was more likely that people would respond doing the thing I wanted them to do, of course, because they would easily see what the goal was. So those were some of the
That's why you're
tips.
So great. That's why it's really, because like I literally would just be like, these people never have emails. And like, I like that you're like, I'm going to like see why they didn't, or like think about it. I'm just like wallowing, not doing anything. But
well,
yeah, and having been on the receiving end of those emails, they were like, it was like, oh, I can reply to this quickly. I know exactly what it's saying.
Good.
And so that's super helpful.
Yeah. Well, the technique was kind of formed out of, I need these guys to do things. It's not working. So.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like the resistance really big.
No,
like...
it was very illuminating.
Yeah.
And I don't think these are, I'm sure lots of people say these things, so it's a common technique, but that I've found effective.
Yeah, but not to me. But yes, I didn't know about it until you did it. But go ahead.
I guess the only other thing I was thinking was, oh yeah, this was a thing that I learned from my research students. So kind of in the umbrella of noticing when something's not working and changing it. So an example with that is if someone keeps saying they're going to do something and isn't doing it, what is happening? You know, why? And in the case of my research students, it seems like it's often that they actually don't know how to start. Like, it seems like they do, and we have the conversation, but there's some piece that they don't know how to do that, if I figure out that piece, suddenly it's fine. Like, one student I remember, after this had happened a while, where it seemed like he was all gung-ho and was going to do it, but it just kept not happening. We went to the lab and, like, got out all the glassware and was like, this is exactly where everything is. And I think that might have been the hang-up was, he had a key to the room. He'd been there before. I assumed he could go and get all the glassware and do it, but he wasn't, I don't know if it wasn't, it felt like an imposition for him to go take the glassware. He wasn't sure what he could touch. I'm not sure where the hang-up was, but as soon as we got the glassware out, suddenly he was good to go. So that was kind of a light bulb moment for me of, okay, he didn't actually know how to start, is what I took away from that. Or like...
And how to start is always the hardest.
It is. It's really hard. So.
And I went to a talk in grad school that was really transformative for me, but it was about procrastination. And it was like, if you're procrastinating, it's usually that you need more information. Like, there's something else you need. And it's not just, like, just calling yourself a lazy jerk isn't...
That doesn't help,
like, no. And so, but it's usually like that, like you said, like, just need more information.
Totally.
Or whatever, getting over the activation barrier of going in there.
Totally. Because it's so often the case that as soon as you start, you're like, oh, I'm cruising, and you can keep going. It's this, you're right, it is the starting. I kind of think another reason for people not doing things is if they don't actually see the value in it. They don't actually want to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe they want to do it, they would like to do this task, but it doesn't seem valuable, so it doesn't get to the top of the priority list, And so in that case, I don't know, maybe a different person or maybe consider whether it is worthwhile, and also make sure that they're clear on why we're doing it. I don't know. Those are some other thoughts.
Yeah. I think, like, part of why, I don't know why, like, I'm so obsessed with you being the leader, but it was a big experience for me to see someone doing it, because sometimes too, like, I've sort of confused leadership with people just being kind of, like, bullying. Do you know what I mean? And so, or just being the loudest voice in the room,
right.
Or kind of, and like, you had this approach in meetings where everybody got to have their voice heard, but somehow you kept things moving along and were, like, able to bring people back. I don't know. It was really like a craft that you had, because it was like, I could see it going the other way where you're like, okay, like, too many cooks. Like, let's just all sit around and chat for like 10 years about this, but not actually making progress. And I really appreciated that like everybody got heard, but then it would be like, okay, but we do need to make a decision on this and this, it was really cool. And it made me think about leadership as being something else other than just being like, the angriest or the loudest in the room.
Right.
And so that was really cool. I like that.
Yeah, because that is kind of a traditional view. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you? What's working well for leadership for you?
So I think a big thing that I've been trying to really do, especially like with the research group stuff and even with the classroom, is sort of honoring the commitment.
Okay.
And so, especially with research, and like last semester I was really slammed with a lot of classes, and I felt like if I could like sneak out of that research meeting early or wrap it up a little early, like I would kind of do that. You know what I mean? Or if something else like more important came up, I'm doing air quotes, but that would I would boot that. And I think that really translates to the people that you're working with. If you're not honoring the time you set aside. So I was trying to really, I got to do something in the Escala thing where I was like a coach. And that was really cool.
You were such a good coach.
Oh, dude. Well, thanks, dude. But I was trying to like, even though I was super busy, I was trying to be like, no, we're having an hour for this meeting and that's how long it's going to be. And I'm going to stretch into that space and not kind of try and wrap things up quickly. Because I've been on the receiving end of those meetings and it doesn't feel good when it's happening to you and someone's like, are we done? Are we done?
Right.
Here we go? And,
sure.
That kind of thing. So I think, especially with my research students now, I'm trying to really honor, we're doing this for an hour. I'm going to definitely be here on time and we're definitely doing the stuff.
I
Do you know
like
what
that.
I mean?
I think that's
And so-
great. You're demonstrating your commitment to whatever it is you're working on. And as the leader, your commitment is important if you're going to try to get other people to commit and buy in as well. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and part of my frustration with research group last semester was kind of like, they're not really taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And then honestly, if I examined my own motivations, I was maybe not taking it seriously.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? And I definitely, if other things came up, I would sort of, that would want to be one of the first things on the list to get, like, oh, we'll have to reschedule. And yeah. And then the other thing that hasn't, like, I haven't been in too many leadership situations outside of the classroom and the research group.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that's really stuck in my head that someone else told me about, and I hope I will do at the time, is like actually kind of honoring being in charge.
Okay.
And I talked to someone who is pretty much the wisest person I know, and I love her, and I hope we will interview her on the show. But she talked about starting a job.
Okay.
And kind of being promoted and maybe being uncomfortable with being the person in charge.
Uh-huh.
And kind of sort of with the people who were working for her being like, oh, well, we're all in this together, and like it's just all of us. And eventually one of them was like, I need you to be the leader, like you have you have to be the person in charge. And I think it's something, especially like for faculty, and sometimes we're on committees and sometimes you're not the leader and sometimes you are the leader, it's really easy to sort of feel really uncomfortable with being in charge of your peers.
Yes, that's true.
And so I can imagine that being really uncomfortable. But at the same time, if you are put in that role, it is actually important to be the one who's like, okay, but I'm, like you did, like bring us all back together. We have to make sure that we actually do the thing we're trying to do. And yeah, so it's not, I'm putting that as working well, as in it's something I will happily aspire to, but I haven't ever really done it. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. To really fulfill the role, step into the shoes of the role of the leader and actually lead. Because it is, I mean, even, I remember a time when I had just met this student and it turned out she was taking my class the next semester, and we weren't quite sure if she was in the section I was teaching or a different section, and I wanted to say, oh, maybe you'll be in my class. But I felt I was uncomfortable taking that leadership role of saying my class, and so I ended up saying maybe we'll be the same class or something weird like that, when really, I mean, I'm not in the class. You know, the proper phrasing was maybe you'll be in my class, but it was hard to take that leadership role. So, I don't know, I see what you mean, but it is important to fill the role and really own it.
And I can see it with kids too, like, and it's a bit clearer for my kids because they're quite little, but you have to be the adult. Like, you can't pretend like, oh, we're friends, and because you're not, like, you're the grown up, and some, you know,
I see. Yeah,
that's how it has to be. And like, it's confusing for kids if you're not clearly being the adult. So, and it feels like it's the same thing for everything. Like, if someone is like, oh, you're the leader but you're not the leader, and can you just step into that role? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And so yeah, I think that's super important. So what are you working on?
So the thing that really came to mind with me about what I'm working on with leadership is kind of, I'm mostly thinking about my research students right now, and it's fostering independence. And sometimes it happens great, and sometimes it doesn't happen, but I feel like I'm not really controlling that at all. They are right now, and I need to get better at controlling that. So yeah, my normal system is, you know, we meet and we have stuff we're working on, but it's kind of more like they do something and then they say, what's next? And that's fine, and that should be how it starts out, but I'm still working on transitioning them to, okay, now you have this big ongoing thing, and you just check in with me periodically. We'll talk about it, but it's your thing, and you're carrying it on to the next step. And you know, certainly that's not a universal problem, because a lot of my students have really jumped up and done awesome and become independent, but I don't think I've really fostered that. I think they've just been really awesome at it. So yeah, how to get them to, how to be a leader such that they can make some decisions themselves in their own process is something I'm kind of working on.
Yeah. I mean, but okay, first of all, I sort of like counter whether you like completely had nothing to do with the other ones.
Well, Maybe.
You know?
Yeah. It's hard to know. But it's definitely not. There's definitely times where I would like to set more students up to be independent, and it seems like it hasn't worked out.
That's super interesting, because like some of it is just where the students are at.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I wonder how to scaffold that. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but I'm thinking of your awesome lab idea you had. Do you remember where you were like, to prepare for the lab, they have to come up with 3 mistakes that might happen? And is there something that you could maybe do as an expectation for the group meetings?
Interesting.
Like, when you come to group meeting, propose the next, 2 possible steps or something. Like, could that be scaffolded more so that? But I don't know.
That's a great idea. Even just telling them, work on this and then think about what to do next might start scaffolding it. And like you're saying, actually actively ask them what they think the next step should be. That's a great idea. I don't do that.
I certainly don't do it either. I'm like, should I do that? But
interesting.
Yeah.
The times that students have really gone off independently, at least, some of them have been when the students have come up with something that they're super excited about and they want to work on it, and then I say, sure, I'll help. So that makes sense. So that seems to suggest that I need to get... I'm not sure whether it's an ownership thing, like if I'm owning the project and I'm just giving them bits to work on, then they don't own the project, and so why would they think about the next thing? Or is it something more like, are they super excited about the project? I'm sure excitement is part of it, but a lot of students are really excited and still aren't owning it. But I think maybe I'm not giving them ownership. I'm holding ownership, and I need to, allow them to propose next steps or something like that.
Well, and I do, and I think it's really important, and independence is really important. But then just sort of knowing some of our student population that we have, and I feel like a lot of them are like seriously in the negative column for confidence. Okay. Do you know what I mean? And some of that only comes with that experience of true. So I think it's sort of like, I don't know, I'm just thinking for each student, it depends, like you're doing this delta time or like delta position, like where it's not necessarily the final point, but where they started to where they end up. So it may be, for some of them, you're actually bringing them this huge distance.
That's a good point.
But it's just that, they started out so tentative.
Right.
Because I've actually had a couple of your students who are in your research group, and they really talk about being in your research group and the cool stuff they're doing with so much pride.
Oh, that's great.
And it definitely seems to give them a lot of confidence.
Oh, good.
But yeah, so I don't know. I hear what you're saying, and I think it's super cool to aspire to doing that, but I do think you're already doing a lot for a lot of them. Good.
And that's a good point, that they're all at different stages of working towards that. And so any progress we can make is good.
Yeah, because I've definitely had students come along who, from the outset, they see themselves as a scientist, and they've always been that kid who's like, oh, but what if we do this? And, that, and sometimes it's almost like, okay, you could actually take that down a notch, but, like there's a little bit of that, but you know what I mean? And so for some of the kids that start doing research with you, they don't even think of themselves as a scientist yet.
Yeah, that's true.
The whole, but I think you're doing a great job. But then, maybe if you did say, come with an idea of what we could do next, or
I think that's great. Like I usually try to be so explicit about why I'm trying to do things, and I think this is another example where being explicit about that ownership and or next steps, it's a great idea.
But then again, I think though, like it sounds like you do tailor things to individuals, because if you did that too soon, that would just terrify someone, and then they would leave and never come back. So
that's a good point.
Who knew there was so much psychology?
So much psychology.
That's a joke, because there's so much, but it's just we never talk about it and acknowledge it. But yeah.
What about you? What are you working on with leadership?
I think something I'm really working on is being okay with people being uncomfortable.
Ooh.
And I'm deeply uncomfortable with people being uncomfortable.
Me too.
And yeah, and so I'm really bad at holding people accountable for things.
Oh.
You know, and especially within the structure of a classroom, it's a little easier because you can sort of pretend that it's just this, like, the laws of physics. There is a quiz and it was on Friday,
Yep.
and that's
Just
it,
how
and
it
it's
is.
out of my hands. But when it's more nebulous, like, oh, you said you were going to do that thing and you didn't do the thing
Right.
that you said, you know, then it's like more, I have a really hard time holding people accountable.
Sure. Me
And
too.
sometimes I even make excuses for them. They don't even have to make excuses because I'm like, oh, but you're probably just busy with this and this. And,
That's
you know,
funny.
just kind of maybe
Yeah.
letting it sit for a moment and being like, oh, you told me you were going to do that and you didn't do it. And that was important
That
you
is
said
hard.
that. And
Yeah.
so I'm really bad at kind of accountability.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that if I could do it and I could do it well, would really benefit the students to be like, yeah, or even be like, I'm kind of frustrated right now. It's not going to be the end of the world, but you didn't do the thing I asked you to do. Or you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
being comfortable with, because like the best thing that can happen to you is to learn that you can make mistakes and it won't be the end of the world, but you did maybe like cause someone some problems by not doing what you said you were going to do.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And
I do.
that's an important lesson, but I'm never the one who's teaching them that because I'm
Right.
just deeply uncomfortable with people being unhappy, or, you know, like I rush in to rescue them from feeling
Yeah.
embarrassed.
This
Yeah.
is something I'm working on too, and I do see other faculty who are very good at saying, you said you were going to do this, or you needed to do it and you didn't do it, and like this is where you went wrong and that's why this is happening. And yeah, I have trouble with that too, or people coming in late. I have trouble telling them
yeah.
that they need to be here on time. Yeah, and I liked what you were saying about you just kind of had a tone of voice of like, well, I'm frustrated about this because XYZ.
Oh yeah, but I don't do that. That's what I say in my head.
Sure, but
which I
I
wish I
think
would do.
that,
But anyway, yeah.
that might be a way for us non-confrontational people to do that, is have some kind of go-to phrase that we can say like that in a nice, calm
scripts.
way.
Yeah, scripts are amazing.
Scripts. Yeah.
Because I just can't, like when I get kind of flooded with emotion,
Yeah.
like I can't think on the fly.
Totally. Yeah. I know. Whenever...
And I go back to...
Yeah.
Sorry, you go.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, a student will not know something that I said in class, and I know they weren't in class, and then I managed to say, oh, we went over that in class, you should be in class. But it's like, it's hard to say that in a non-awkward, totally calm way, because I'm trying to not make them feel bad, but I also want them to know this is why you missed that piece of information, and an easy fix would be to come to class, you know?
This has literally happened to me like 100 times. and I've never handled it well. I would love to just have
A script. Or, I don't know.
Yeah, and just, you know, but maybe it is awkward. Like maybe they should feel a little awkward.
Yeah.
Like if, you know, and I definitely, maybe I have managed to say sometimes like, oh, did you get any notes? Because, yeah, this would have been in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but like not, that's like really passive aggressive actually
Sure.
now that I'm saying it. It's not to the point. But just, yeah, like it is really frustrating. And it's not frustrating to repeat something. Well, I mean, maybe it is a bit, but it's not the same kind of frustrating if someone was in class and they
Right.
just didn't understand it. That's like,
That's totally
Totally.
reasonable.
but yeah. Yeah.
One thing
it's-
that I've done that I find somewhat successful with this is to send an email, a personal email. I mean, you know, mostly this is in the scenario where student didn't come to class. I noticed they didn't come to class. I want to tell them they should come to class. And maybe it would work with something they said they were going to do and didn't do as well. But then in the email, you can take the time to structure the sentence the way you want it to be structured. And usually what I say is something like, noticed you weren't in class today. I assume it was a fluke. But it's really important to be in class because we cover all this material and, you know, something or other about,
yeah.
I hope you're able to come to all the rest of the classes or something. And usually they reply because it's an individual email. And so, I don't know. At least they got the message.
Yeah. Because it's hard too, because like I had a situation come up with a research student where they just weren't writing this paper they said they were going to write. And it was deeply frustrating because it wasn't a task I assigned to them. It was like, you guys can sign up to do this if you want. And they decided to do it, but then it was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. And it was just like, oh my God, like, I don't want you to be sorry. I just want you to either do it or not do it. But like, I just want to not be in this weird swirl of me checking up on, it just was really frustrating. Yeah. But I couldn't, sometimes like, I just want to get out of them apologizing to me like I'm their mom.
Right.
And get into, yes, this is a professional thing that you said you were going to do and you didn't do it.
Right.
Or like I had a student before who would always come to research meetings. Like, and these were only 30-minute research meetings because of scheduling, and they would come like 15 or 20 minutes late. And it's like, oh, and I wish I could be the person to just say like, no, you just can't come in right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's disruptive and it's pointless because you've missed the first half of everything.
Yeah. And maybe that's the kind of case where if it's repeated, you have time to script something because you're like, it's probably going to happen next week. And if it doesn't, it'll happen the week after. So what am I going to say? I mean, you have to decide to do it and sit down and make a script. But it could be, I don't know. I could see myself writing a script for like the late student who's always late. If I at least had it all prepared, I could like maybe actually say it if I knew the line.
Do you know, this is why this podcast is actually awesome for me. Because kind of what I'm thinking about now is, like, what are my actual learning outcomes for the research group?
Ooh.
Do you know, and like having something like professional behaviour.
Yes.
And sometimes professional behaviour can be like a sneaky term that can be, anyway, it can be problematic. But I guess in this case, I mean, like, skills that I genuinely think will be helpful to people in their further workplace. And being accountable.
Sure. I mean, whatever norms they're coming from, and whether that is fine in different settings or not, in this professional setting of your research group, you have certain expectations, and if they're going to be in your research group, they should, do those, if you make it clear what they are.
Yeah, like, because for me, a big one is communication. And hearing from people, because a lot of people, if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, they just hide out.
Right.
And that drives me bananas. Like, if someone can just say, this is a bad week for me, I have not done what I said I was going to do.
And I've scheduled it on Tuesday, then, yeah, great.
Right. But when they just are, like, hiding out and kind of avoiding you, that's really deeply frustrating. So, yeah, maybe I need to have a bit more of a think about, like, what... Because I don't think I genuinely know sometimes what my actual research group goals are. And I think, having this sort of thing would be really beneficial. That's a great idea.
And that's that can be a motivation too. Sometimes I don't want to say these things to tell a student that they should have done something differently.
Oh, totally.
But the motivation is really, for me, they should learn this so that they can be professional in whatever thing they go off to next.
Dude, we just came full circle. Do you remember at the beginning and you were talking about procrastinating on something because you don't know why it's important?
Yeah.
Oh, look at us.
It's true. All cohesive.
Do you remember, I know, we're on this journey, this storytelling arc. I like it. It would be great if we'd planned it, but...
well,
even maybe it's even better that it's organic. But yeah. Well, cool. Thank you. That's blown my mind about leadership.
Yeah, lots of good thoughts about leadership. I don't think explicitly about leadership very often, so this was great to really think about it.
Me neither. And I really, like, whenever leadership comes up, I'm like, well, that's not me. That's not, that's not for me. And
but you lead all the time.
Yeah. I guess we do, because, in the classroom. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great to talk about.
Yeah.
And thanks again, Ralph, for setting this up, as always.
Yes, thanks, Ralph. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.